Hi everybody. This one's about Coughlin 666's latest good friend and DMCAer, Molotov Cockfail, and his interesting ideas on education in the United States. So he starts off by saying that America's number one problem is our lack of theological understanding, which leads to a lack of spiritual relationship with God. Dude, ever heard of a thing called the economy? Unemployment? People losing their homes because they couldn't afford health insurance? So far, your sense of priorities seems pretty warped. It's pretty obvious who his target audience is, though. Then he goes into some paranoid rant about the evils of public education and that it's not all the joy and happiness like the movies portray. Specifically, he spells out two particular movies, Stand and Deliver, a true story about Hispanic school children and their Hispanic teacher, and Dangerous Minds, another movie about minority students. So films about teachers successfully reaching out to disadvantaged minorities bothers you in some way? We'll revisit that idea in a minute here. Then he sets his sights on public school teachers because public school teachers are killing America. Remind me again, how many public school teachers in the United States have bombed federal buildings or murdered abortion workers? He points out that the U.S. isn't even ranked in the top 25 for science, math, or reading, and points out Finland as a country with a successful school system. Finland is consistently ranked at the top in their education system. And what's their secret? Well, he claims it's vouchers. A school voucher is a credit from the government that allows parents to avoid the additional cost of sending their children to private religious schools. His claim that Finland uses vouchers is pretty interesting given the fact that public education in Finland is free, including private schools. Fact-checking anybody? I wonder where the hell he gets his information from. Wait a minute. He writes for Wingnut Daily. That explains a lot. There's an interesting side note about Wingnut Daily. You know how sometimes the BBC likes to put up little April Fool's jokes sometimes? A couple of years ago, they reported on the Great Penguin Migration, saying that a group of penguins flew to South America. Oh yeah. Wingnut Daily fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, and reported it on their website as an actual news story. It was a few hours before somebody pointed out that it was an obvious April Fool's joke, and they quickly took it down, but the damage was done and WMD was a laughingstock. Anyway, back to education. He claims that homeschool kids in America understand the Constitution on average far better than public school kids. Given his other claims, I have to wonder. I also wonder how well they do at things like biology, geology, age of the earth, evolution. Then he goes on about some group of schmucks that want all Christian families to yank their kids out of public education immediately. And why? Because the public education system cannot be reformed. So Comrade Cockfail claims that a socialist country like Finland is capable of making public education work while America can't? Dude, you really hate America, don't you? Public education is some sort of evil conspiracy originally set up by some obscure humanist in the 1930s. Newsflash, public education has existed in the United States since the 1800s. For crying in a sink, did you just make this shit up as you go along? So, while talking to his white Christian audience, he wants to gut the U.S. education system and replace it with vouchers for private schools, so they don't have to mix it up with kids like those from Stand and Deliver or Dangerous Minds. I seem to remember the U.S. did something like that before. What was that called again? Oh yeah, I remember now. Yeah, that thing that was outlawed in U.S. public schools over 50 years ago in Brown versus Board of Education, and for good reason. Separate but equal was an obvious farce. But this goes beyond the old-style segregation. In the good old days of the 1950s, they were segregated public schools. But this new segregation will funnel taxpayer money into private schools with private rules. Rules that allow the anointed ones to reject anyone for any reason. So, Comrade Cockfail, this is your vision for America? A system that's even worse than the ones that was outlawed back in the 1950s by the Supreme Court? Do the country a favor. Move to Iran. You'd fit in perfectly with their public school system.